We are back here on the Analytical Iowan podcast. It is Friday, June 5th, and we've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. There is so much stuff going on with this administration, um, and it's every single day. Every day there is something with this administration. Now, I want to thank everybody, like I said yesterday on the show, for sticking with me through the technical problems, things like that, as I am trying to clean up the back end of getting everything uploaded. Um, I don't want to give up on the automation side of it because it does some things that I appreciate that saves me a lot of time. And that seems to right now be where the struggle is. Um, and working through that. So as I'm working on getting that cleaned up, and I haven't had this many problems with it really since I started using it. So hopefully I can figure out what's going on. I know I've had some issues also with bandwidth and things like that on my uploads. I was uploading one of the podcasts to Spotify the other day, and I ended up having to switch to a mobile hotspot actually instead of using my home internet for a little bit. It was just randomly, and it went weird. I was able to upload it in like 20 minutes with the mobile hotspot when it said I was sitting at like 700 waiting on it with my home Wi-Fi connection. So that was weird. And I don't know what it was all going on there. So I'm fighting a couple things technologically. Hopefully, we will be back on track here in the next few days. So I'm going to keep recording every day, trying to get them posted and uploaded um, to YouTube, to Spotify, and everywhere. Um, and I appreciate everybody else that is coming in. All of the new subscribers. Um, I keep seeing an uptick in that number. That number keeps growing, so I appreciate that as well. In the coming days and weeks, um, now that the Iowa primary is over, Rob Sand is now the official nominee for the Democrats for governor. I do intend to reach out again here sometime soon to see if I can get him here as a guest on the podcast. Um, I think that would be great. I want to give him the opportunity to pitch his campaign to anybody listening, both within the state of Iowa and outside the state, even though you can't vote for him if you're not in Iowa. Um, One of the things about campaigns is funding is crucial and donors are crucial, and you never know what campaigns you're going to end up donating to. Not that I'm trying to put any of you guys on the spot to donate to any political campaigns, but it is something that could help. Also, it just helps getting the message out there um, that maybe there is some hope out there on the horizon. I keep saying that the midterms are coming, and it is going to be one of the things that will get us through all of the problems that we have by getting to the midterms, voting, and putting the Democrats back in charge. And I can tell it's going to be working because of how terrified the Republicans are. They are very worried about things that are coming up. They are worried about the midterms and what potentially could happen when it comes to any of it. I keep saying that the House is going to flip to the Democrats by uh, 30 to 50 seats, and that the Senate is at least in play. But um, we will have to see how the midterms itself actually plays out. Now, like I said, I've been saying that the House and the Senate could flip, and that puts an end to a lot of what's going on when it comes to uh, Donald Trump and all of the damage he is doing. Now, yesterday, Donald Trump gave a press conference and he fell asleep again. He's sitting there, slumped over, leaning back, head tilted forward. He's asleep. And it's a while before he comes around. This wasn't just a quick, oh, we caught him blinking. This was multiple seconds of him being asleep. And when he comes around, the big thing with it is that he ends up not only does he kind of come around, at the end he says some stuff, he kind of garbles through as they're thanking everybody and as he's wrapping it up, then he kind of just says good. Like, he struggled with words. He had a big bout of mush mouth. And then he says good because it was the only word he could really get to. And then they move on. Now, the people around him are trying to say that, you know, didn't happen. He doesn't fall asleep. Rubio was talking to the House, wasn't the House Oversight Committee. I don't remember which House committee it was. Let me see if I can figure it out here. Rubio. Here we go. Here it is. Here's one of the articles about it anyway. Representative Ted Lieu was talking to Marco Rubio. Doesn't say which oh, it must have been Foreign Policy Committee, I think, and asked him about Donald Trump falling asleep, and says, quote, "Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here today." This is all coming from Ted Lieu. Quote, "Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here today. You have been at multiple meetings with President Trump. In a moment, I'm going to show you a video of one of these meetings. It's from last December. It is a cabinet meeting. I'm going to ask you to focus on President Trump, and you will see he is sleeping while you are talking." Yeah, it was the foreign, end quote. And that was from the Foreign Affairs Committee. As they were playing the video, Rubio laughed out loud. A clip showed Trump speaking next to a slumped over Trump saying, products they make and what American farmers grow. This is what Rubio is saying. Products they make and what American farmers grow and produce has a fair shot to be sold around the world. And he continues. Lieu says, "Secretary Rubio, have you been at more than one meeting where President Trump has fallen asleep?" Rubio replies, "I have never seen him fall asleep. On the contrary, the guy doesn't sleep, which is a big problem because he calls me at 2 in the morning. He calls at 5 in the morning. You know, I like to sleep a little bit, maybe not 12 hours, but at least 6. So he works. The other day he was at the Oval Office until 12:30 a.m. I don't know what you're talking about." Lieu said, "Secretary Rubio, I'm going to show you in a moment a video that shows you just lied to Congress." And then they proceed to show him again another clip of Donald Trump sleeping. And he did it again just yesterday. There is so many issues with Donald Trump. And why is he falling asleep? Because his health is bad. He's suffering from late stage dementia. He's sundowns. That's why he's up till the middle of the night, all hours of the night, posting. When Marco Rubio says he's up till 2 a.m., 5 a.m., or whatever, that's because he's sundowning. I know multiple people who are battling from either dementia or stroke related symptoms, things like that, where if they don't get to bed before a certain point in the night, they are awake all night. They can't turn their brain off. And that is what Donald Trump is working with. He gets up, he gets awake, his brain starts going, he starts posting some of these AI slop um, images and videos and other things where, like the image of him looking like Jesus. And then they tell him, well, tell him it was a doctored image. And he says, it made me look like a doctor. It's because his brain is mush. So that is part of the reason why I think um, Democrats are going to win the House is because of how bad off Donald Trump is. Now, with this cabinet meeting and Donald Trump falling asleep and Marco Rubio trying to lie to Congress and doing all of this, they, the people around him are eventually going to have to be held accountable when the Democrats get back into power. They are. They're going to have to hold them accountable. We're going to need a very strong attorney general to go after them for everything, including propping up Donald Trump. Now, the question becomes why? Why are they propping him up so bad? Well, that is because he's got political capital left. They want to use that political capital for them to get to the midterms. They think they can use him to get help in the midterms, to win seats in the House, win maybe the Senate. And it's not so much that they're going to flip seats, because I do not believe that they have a chance to actively flip any seats. We've seen election after election after election, and it hasn't gotten any better for them. Multiple seats have flipped from, I think we're up to 34, maybe 35 seats that have flipped from Republican to Democrat. We have not really seen any flip the other way. That trend is only going to continue come the midterms. But see, they're hoping that they can use Donald Trump and use his political capital to stop that bleeding. Now, after the midterms, and we're already seeing Republicans break with Donald Trump on certain things, you're going to see more and more of it as his political capital is gone. And then at that point, they have nothing to lose, everything to gain by breaking from him. But they are going to try to set themselves up for the 2028 cycle. And I can already see it. And I've been saying it for a while. What I think is going to happen is if they move away from Donald Trump after the midterms, where they get into next year, say early January, maybe even February, after the Democrats have control of the House and maybe the Senate, when J.D. Vance becomes president, they are going to try to say that it's all the Democrats' fault because they wouldn't let J.D. Vance fix anything. And what I think they're going to try to do is say, well, the Democrats wouldn't let J.D. Vance fix all the things that they broke, despite the fact that Donald Trump would have had 2 years to fix it by that point, and he's actively making things worse. Their whole platform going into 28, and that is if J.D. Vance ends up running. There is some debate as to whether or not he's going to try. Donald Trump keeps the mystery up as to whether or not, likes to keep the mystery up as to whether or not he's going to run in 28. He is not healthy enough to run in 28. Look at, you talk about the dementia, you talk about him sundowning, him falling asleep in these meetings. He doesn't have the stamina, he doesn't have the energy. Even if he was in his right mind, he would probably privately say he's not running in 28. Publicly, he wants to keep the grift alive. He wants to keep all of the things floating about whether or not he's going to run, because he can keep fundraising off of it. And he likes being the center of attention. The minute he says, I'm endorsing JD Vance or I'm endorsing Marco Rubio, and he makes it hard and permanent, the party's moving past him, and he becomes kind of old news. And Donald Trump can't stand that. Now, was just talking about the uh, midterms and the races there. Now that doesn't actually tell me what I thought it did. Um, Now we are watching the vote count come in for California in their primary. Now California has what is called a jungle primary. And that jungle primary has everybody. There's like 60 people in on the jungle primary that are all running uh, basically trying to get to be the final two. Doesn't matter party, it doesn't matter anything. The final two come through, and those are the ones that advance to the November election. Well, Spencer Pratt is potentially going to be on the ballot as the Republican nominee for LA mayor. However, we are going to have to see how the rest of the vote comes in. Now, Donald Trump is railing against this vote. Of course, if he had his way, he would have all the votes counted by 11 p.m. on election night. But part of the reason why it's taking so long to count the votes in California, one, there are just that many votes, and two, they have to do all of the checks that Republicans actually want to make sure people who should not vote aren't voting. But see, Republicans won't tell you that. They want you to believe that there's all kinds of voter fraud. All right. Now, uh, yesterday, water began flowing into the Lincoln Memorial uh, reflecting pool. Now, they have repainted the the base of the pool. Yes, Wednesday, Trump posted on Truth Social that a final coat of protection on the pool was to be completed by 4 p.m. The water would start flowing shortly thereafter. So the reflecting pool is done. We're gonna have to see what the final color is. The only pictures and images I've seen so far showed the water starting to flow in. It wasn't full enough to really see what that coloring was going to look like. However, where it was painted, etc., it did not look bluish like what they were trying to say. Now, Donald Trump would want it to look bright blue, uh, like swimming pool, or like when you think of like going to swim in like the tropics or like the Bahamas, things like that, where it is pristine blue water. That's what he was hoping for, and it's not going to happen. The project was uh, done in preparation for the United States 250th anniversary, including walking paths around the pool. Final cost of the project is expected to come in between 13 and 20 million, at least 10 times the original cost. And part of what Donald Trump was showing at that press conference, where he fell asleep again, and he showed an image that made no sense. It ties into the reflecting pool, but it was a big chart, and he pulls it out and he tries to show that the reflecting pool is bigger than some skyscrapers. Here's the thing: you are dealing with length, not height. The reflecting pool is not tall, it is long. And comparing the length of something to the height of something else is entirely different. Now, comparing the length of the reflecting pool, you should compare it to other things like it, but there's really nothing else like it to compare. But Donald Trump has always been big on the numbers, right? He has inflated the size of Trump Tower during 9/11. Uh, he was doing an interview. I think it was with Howard Stern, but I'm not sure. And while we are still dealing with like the day of 9/11 and the Twin Towers collapsing. And they're down looking for survivors, which he was never down at Ground Zero helping to look for survivors. He says he was, but it has been proven that he was never there. Um, well, all of that is going on. He's giving an interview and he says, well, now I've got the tallest building in Manhattan. I think it was Manhattan. Doesn't matter. He says, I've now got the tallest building. That's the type of person Donald Trump is. He cares more about, you know, size and, the image, the prestige, all of that. It's all about making himself look better, and he doesn't care who he steps on or makes look worse in the process. All right. Moving on. This comes from The Hill. Cassidy slams RFK Jr. over resurgence in vaccine preventable diseases. All right. Senator Cassidy slams RFK Jr. over resurgence in vaccine preventable diseases. Again from The Hill. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana directly blamed Health and Human Services Secretary R.F. Kennedy Jr. for a resurgence in vaccine preventable illnesses. On Twitter, Cassidy shared a New York Times article reporting on hospitals seeing a resurgence in vaccine preventable illnesses, with doctors telling the outlet they're frequently seeing illnesses they used to rarely encounter. Cassidy said a terrible outcome from RFK and others promoting vaccine skepticism. When reached for comment, Health and Human Services spokesperson told The Hill, we reject the premise that providing Americans with transparent information about the benefits and risks of medical products undermine public health. Secretary Kennedy believes Americans deserve clear, evidence-based information so they can make healthcare decisions in consultation with their providers. Secretary remains committed to ensuring public health policies are grounded in gold standard science and to restoring confidence in our public health institutions, end quote. Except that's not what's going on. Robert Kennedy Jr. is a vaccine denier. They're coming out, putting all sorts of doubts out about these vaccines, trying to change vaccine schedules. Well, you don't really know what's in there. These vaccines have been proven safe and effective for decades. But now, suddenly, thanks to R.F. Kennedy Jr. and his new version of Health and Human Services, they are so paranoid about vaccines, and he's putting together panels to be anti-vax that it's not allowing people to actually make these decisions. They're promoting the idea that there's a potential link between vaccines and autism, which has been disproven. The only study that ever supposedly proved, I should say, any sort of correlation or link actually led to the doctor being disbarred or in losing his license. Disbarred, wrong term. That's for attorneys, but losing his license rather. And he ended up retracting it down the road. Now, this continuing from The Hill, these remarks by Cassidy are some of the most pointed against Kennedy and one of the first criticisms he lobbed against the secretary since losing his re-election bid last month. But see, Cassidy, you knew, Bill Cassidy, this is where my issue here. He's now saying these things because he lost his primary. If he had won his primary, there is a good chance Bill Cassidy would still be saying the same things that he said before. Now, Bill Cassidy was skeptical of R.F. Kennedy Jr. when he was nominated, but yet he still voted to confirm him. Now, Cassidy is a doctor, is one of the most prominent vaccine proponents in the Senate, and during his tenure as chair of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pension, he's had to grapple with with RF Kennedy Jr.'s anti-vax policies, although he did decide to confirm Kennedy, and that's a problem. When Kennedy last year unceremoniously fired and remade the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices for the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, Cassidy said the panel had been totally discredited. Although no longer in the running for election, Cassidy still chairs the HELP Committee, which is the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, which will be tasked with potentially confirming at least two of Trump's most recent healthcare nominees, Erica Schwartz to lead the CDC and Nicole Safier to be the next Surgeon General. But that's the thing here. Bill Cassidy, while he is saying some of the things that need to be said, we could see these things coming when RF Kennedy Jr. was nominated. And instead of saying, yeah, this guy's nuts, no, they said, yeah, sure, not a big deal. And now that he can't be, now that he's got nothing to lose, now he's willing to push back. Now, that is all fine and well, but, we got to keep this in mind when it comes to everything involving Donald Trump. It's transactional. These Republicans that are now pushing back against Donald Trump, these defeated incumbents, they're only doing it because they don't have to answer to the voters. If they would have won their primary and been on the ballot, would they have been willing to do this as far? Why, I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. Now, again, this comes from the Hill. Defeated GOP incumbents snubbed by Trump may be more willing to buck him. Republican incumbents who were snubbed by President Trump in midterm primary races are increasingly signaling they will make more independent approach to his agenda, creating fresh challenges for GOP leaders as they race to notch a series of legislative victories in the weeks ahead. Republicans are looking to pass immigration enforcement funding package, secure long-term extension to the government's warrantless spying powers, and advance a third-party spending line package without Democratic votes that could include funding for the Iran military conflict, fraud prevention, and other GOP priorities. But Trump's decision to pack primary challenges against some members of his party and threaten others who have bucked him have left both the White House and the GOP leaders with a political dilemma. In a Congress defined by razor-thin margins, even a few lawmakers could derail the efforts to advance the most ambitious priorities. Now, that's a lot, but effectively, they're saying the same thing I've been saying. And that was just me looking at the primaries as they lost and saying, yeah, they've got nothing to lose. And the more this happens, as these Republicans lose their primary bids, the more and more likely more of them are going to be willing to break from Donald Trump. Now, will it lead to them doing the ultimate betrayal and removing him? I don't know. But I've been saying that they are more willing to move away from him. Now, Representative Wesley Hunt, a Republican of Texas, said, quote, they could feel as emboldened as they want. They could be upset with the president with maybe some of his decisions to endorse against them as they want. But we are one party, are we not? So at this point, those are all personal feelings and personal animus that has nothing to do with getting the America First agenda across the table, which is exactly what President Trump wants to do. So again, are you going to put party over self, or do you want to put self over party, which is going to be the question these people are going to have to answer. And again, like if you want to go out and be an obstructionist to the agenda that the American people put in office, not once now, but twice, I think it's going to be consequences for that. End quote. So Hunt, who was defeated in his primary bid for Texas Senate. But the thing is here, like I said, they don't have to answer to the voters. Now he says this Hunt says, well, we got to stick with Trump. Why? Saying, well, the voters put us in here to do this America First thing. Yeah, but you were standing with Trump because you thought it was beneficial to your political career. Politicians, specifically Republican politicians, more than Democrats, but Democrats to a lesser extent, do care about power. And once they lose that power, they are going to be more willing to break from Trump. And the more this happens, and the farther along this gets, they've got less to lose. Uh, Now, Bill Cassidy was one of 4 senators to vote in favor of a war powers resolution that could limit Trump's military actions against Iran. He had been opposing it since before his primary. He also opposed a provision in the immigration funding package that would provide $1 billion in security funds to the new White House ballroom and other Secret Service priorities, to the point where Senate Republicans ended up dropping it entirely. Not just because Bill Cassidy went against it, but because they didn't have the votes. Now, that means there was going to be an extra $1 billion they were going to put in this funding package for the ballroom at the White House. And Republicans finally said, screw it, we're not doing it. We're not going to push forward with it. And that's Bill Cassidy in the Senate, but the House isn't going to be any easier. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson may not have it much easier on the House side. Thomas Massie is one that is probably going to start voting no against everything. And they can't really afford, he can only afford to lose 2 right now. Can Mike Johnson? Now, Representatives Ralph Norman and Nancy Mace are both contenders for the South Carolina gubernatorial race. They could be headaches for Johnson down the road, as Trump has endorsed Lieutenant Governor Pamela Abbott for governor. Now, depending on how that plays out, they could be willing to vote against him. Asked about whether he was concerned with whether these incumbents could derail party priorities down the line, Chip Roy of Texas, who lost his attorney general primary to a MAGA challenger, says, my view is I've always voted my conscience, frankly, and some might say to a fault, and that's the way I will always vote. So how any other members, deal with it or not, that's up to them. But I'm going to vote on bills based on their merit. Except we'll see if that's actually true. Republican Representative Brian Fitzpatrick is a moderate who has been threatened by Trump. Told CNN's Anderson Cooper when asked about the ire against him, it says, I answer to no person or party in Washington, D.C. I work for the people in Bucks and Montgomery counties in Pennsylvania. They're my bosses. That's the approach every member of Congress is supposed to take, which is true. They're the ones who send us to D.C. We have the power to represent them, and my constituents have made clear they don't want money for a ballroom. They don't want money for a slush fund. They want us to focus on affordability issues, and that's what we're going to do for them. See, I've been saying for a while, these Republicans, they're opportunists. And that's what this article was just saying, that they are extreme opportunists. And they are going to turn on Donald Trump if they ever think that it is beneficial to them. Now, there is a vote-a-rama going on, or was yesterday. Tons of amendments. One of the things that got voted on was an amendment by Chuck Schumer to prohibit the Department of Justice from establishing a $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund for MAGA allies. Now, Todd Blanche has said that is dead. It's done. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. He said it's done. We're not going forward with it anymore. And that's because a court, for now, has put it on hold. But they were trying to pass it into law, saying absolutely not, nobody would get it. Susan Collins, Dan Sullivan, and John Husted of Ohio, all three senators who faced tough reelection bids in November, voted with Democrats, but it wasn't enough to get across the threshold. The proposal, which would have amended a $70 billion budget reconciliation package for ICE enforcement or immigration enforcement, it still failed by a 49-50 vote. All Democrats voted for it. Now, Senator Michael Bennet was absent, but it didn't make a difference because it would have been a 50-50 tie. J.D. Vance would have been the tie-breaking vote. But the vote was kept open for nearly 3 hours as Republican senators debated amongst themselves over possible amendments to the budget reconciliation package that would prohibit the administration's ability to establish the anti-weaponization fund. Bill Cassidy, who we were just talking about a little bit ago, threatened to join Collins, Sullivan, and Husted in voting for the amendment unless he got assurances from the Senate Majority Leader John Thune that he would be able to amend the bill to bar anti-weaponization fund from being established. Now, Rand Paul told reporters the vote on Schumer's amendment was held open for so long because there was an impasse over whether or not there can be something put into the bill to ensure there was no anti-weaponization fund. Now, the amendment would have permanently barred Trump from establishing the nearly $1.8 billion fund, which critics in both parties called a slush fund, and it would have needed only a simple majority to pass. The amendment would have instructed the Senate to commit the budget reconciliation bill to the Judiciary Committee with instructions to report it back out in 3 days with changes to safeguard the Department of Justice from partisan political influence and corruption. It would have instructed the panel to add language to prohibit any money from being appropriated and being used for an anti-weaponization fund. Now, you would think that would be a no-brainer, but these Republicans, even Bill Cassidy, who is voting against Donald Trump on certain things and who doesn't like this weaponization fund, was still a no vote and didn't vote to pass it. The amendment referred to a federal statute governing the U.S. Judgment Fund, which is a permanent, indefinite Treasury appropriation that provides funds to pay out final judgments and settlements reached against the federal government. Even Republican critics of the opposed weaponization fund, including Thom Tillis and Murkowski, voted against the amendment. And see, I don't understand why they would vote against it, other than they're trying to save face when it comes time for re-election. Now, Blanche had said we are not moving forward with the fund, period. When Representative Grace Meng, the ranking member of the House Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriation Subcommittee, pressed Blanche to clarify that the Department of Justice would not ever move forward with the fund, Blanche said correct. Now, Chuck Schumer wanted to put it in writing and put it into law because he views any guarantee like that as worthless. And I tend to agree. Trusting anything this administration says about anything is pretty bad. I mean, and I know it's not the same. Sorry about that. I had to deal with the dog. And I completely lost my train of thought, but I think I made my point. Oh, we were talking about the weaponization fund. and how I think it's still DOA, but I don't trust anything coming out of this administration. And I view that, yeah, I agree that with Chuck Schumer's assessment that the uh, guarantees and stuff from this administration are effectively worthless. We need to put stuff in writing into the legal framework so that way the courts can come around and say, yeah, Congress said no. Speaking of Todd Blanche, Wednesday, Donald Trump signaled he is going to name acting Attorney General Todd Blanche to be the top Attorney General. During a dinner at the White House, the president said he will instruct Dan Scavino, the director of the White House Presidential Personnel Office, and other aides to nominate him to the position on Thursday. Trump said of Blanche on Twitter, "We're going to make him permanent Attorney General." Blanche has overseen the Department of Justice for just more than 2 months after Donald Trump fired Attorney General Pam Bondi. He was Deputy Attorney General after spending much of 2024 as Donald Trump's personal attorney. It will require Senate confirmation, first via the Judiciary Committee, chaired by Chuck Grassley. Now, if Chuck Grassley, I don't know, he doesn't give two shits about what I think, but if he wanted to win back some respect for some people who have given up on him for a while, what he could do is he could stop Todd Blanche right there and say, yeah, we're not letting this out of the Judiciary Committee. He's got no chance. But he's probably going to just pass Todd Blanche on. Now we will see if Todd Blanche actually does get confirmed. Now, shortly after taking over the reins of the DOJ, Blanche oversaw its second indictment of James Comey over alleged threats to Trump, which I believe did get tossed out. He also announced last month that the creation of the anti-weaponization fund we were just talking about, but a federal judge in Virginia had blocked the administration from making any payments via the fund, and they have now put it on hold. Let's see. During his time as Bondi's deputy, Blanche also faced criticism from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle over its delayed and incomplete release of the Epstein files. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, which received near unanimous support in Congress before Trump signed it into law in November, after the president had been calling it a hoax for months, required the DOJ to release all files tied to the disgraced financier within 30 days. After Trump ousted Bondi, Blanche sought to distance himself from the files and brushed off concerns that the administration was ignoring the victims. But they're still not completely released at all. They are still, you know, bucking it all. They are still trying to not release all of the Epstein files because of reasons. Now let's see. This is not the story I was going to cover, but I think this is something I should have covered on TikTok. Maybe I should. President Trump told reporters on Thursday that he did not notice cognitive decline in former President Biden when they met in November 2024, after he won re-election. He said, "No, not really. He was the same guy I've been watching for a long time," Trump said when asked if he could detect any cognitive decline in Biden. Now, Donald Trump still took a dig. He said, "I watched him 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Never the sharpest guy. It wasn't like he was sharp as a tack. No, it was the same guy. He was fine as far as I was concerned." Except now, where's that coming from? See, I think it's because Donald Trump is now worried about all of the things we're seeing. Whether he wants to admit it or not, he'll never publicly admit that he's worried. But I think in the back of his head, I think there is some doubt there. So he's now trying to say, no, Biden was fine, despite for 5 years trying to rail on Joe Biden as being sleepy Joe and out of it. And when they say Joe Biden wasn't very sharp, really the only thing they have to go on is Joe Biden having a stutter. And yeah, did he lose a few steps because of his age? Sure. But he was nowhere near as bad as what Donald Trump is. Trump went on to note that something happened to Biden during their June 2024 debate, adding that it could have been me. Quote, so the question is, did he do badly because he choked or because he didn't have it, but he didn't have a good night? End quote. When pressed again by reporters about the 2024 meeting, Trump noted that Biden spoke softly, which he's done almost his entire career. Trump said they got that as we talked, we got along very well. I thought he was fine. Now, these comments come as former First Lady Jill Biden has made headlines where she's promoting her new book and she talks about the final year of Joe Biden's presidency. And some of the things she has said has resparked concerns about Joe Biden's health and whether or not he should have run. And I'm going to say the same thing I've been saying for a while. I said at the time when Joe Biden stepped out of the race and everybody was freaking out and pushing for him to leave, I said to those Democrats, you'd better be prepared. You'd better be right because it's too late in the year for Joe Biden to step aside. And I was right. And then I said after the fact that I've been looking at it and I still think this is true. Joe Biden shouldn't have just stepped aside. The better move would have been for him to resign the presidency, let Kamala Harris take over, let her go into November as the president with the reins of power, have people watch how she did, and that would have changed the narrative. But the whole thing there is now Donald Trump is trying to say Joe Biden was fine. He was fine. He might have had a bad night, but he was fine. I think he's trying to do that because in some levels, I think Donald Trump is very worried about his own health and his own cognition. And he's hoping that maybe by saying Joe Biden was a little better, maybe it'll take some of the pressure off of himself. All right, last story we're going to talk about here also comes from The Hill. Kennedy Center staff told to begin removing Trump's name with a June 12th deadline. Kennedy Center lawyers instructed staff to immediately begin removing Donald Trump's name from the facility after a federal judge blocked the administration from rebranding the facility to include the president's name. An internal memo sent Thursday, which was first obtained and reviewed by CBS, the center's general counsel told employees that email signatures, letterhead, and other documents must be changed to reflect the venue's original name, the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, or Kennedy Center. The memo also sets a June 12th deadline to replace interior and exterior signage, as well as remove its Trump-affiliated name from furniture and other materials. The directive marks the first official sign that the arts institution is complying with a federal court ruling that deemed the controversial name change as unlawful, even though it was approved by the Board of Trustees. District Judge Christopher Cooper last week ruled in favor of Representative Joyce Beatty of Ohio, a ex officio member of the center's board, who challenged both the renaming as well as plans to close it for 2 years for extensive renovations. Cooper said in his ruling, the Kennedy Center's organic statute makes it crystal clear that the center is to be named for President Kennedy, and it cannot bear any other formal name or public memorial based on the board's unilateral say-so. According to the memo, the center officials are still considering their options and will provide further guidance shortly on whether the center will remain open past its scheduled $257 million renovation project set to begin July 5th. Roma Davari, Vice President of Public Relations for the Kennedy Center, told The Hill, "We are complying with the court's order while evaluating all legal options to preserve this revitalization and recognize President Trump's leadership." Cooper's ruling did not prohibit a closure outright, but required the board to reconsider their decision. The court is not persuaded by that the closure is categorically unwarranted or impermissible under U.S. Code. The court's preliminary injunction thus does not bar the board from reconsidering the closure in a prudent manner. Basically, he said, let's look at it again and see why we are closing it. Trump blasted the judge over the ruling, saying Cooper should be ashamed of himself for blocking this administration request to rename the Kennedy Center. Donald Trump doesn't care. He just wants his name on it because he's worried about his legacy. He keeps adding his name to a lot of things, or trying to get his name added to a lot of things. And he keeps thinking that is going to somehow ingratiate himself with the American people, that after he is gone, that people are going to remember him fondly. No, he's going to be one of the presidents that is rarely talked about. I mean, his name is going to go down in history as probably the worst president of all time. And there's going to be, I think, the biggest benefit of the Trump presidency is going to be what happens after he is gone, when they start passing things like potentially a constitutional amendment or two to prevent somebody like Donald Trump from ever becoming president again. And potentially, when the Democrats go after everybody that helped this administration do all the things it has done, and people are held accountable, it's going to end up being a bigger scandal than what happened with Nixon and Watergate. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Hope you have a great day, and we will be back again tomorrow.